Lesson 14. We're in John chapter 4 now. First four verses say, "Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria." Here we see that Jesus knew that because of his rising prominence and popularity, there would soon be a confrontation with the religious establishment, among whom were the Pharisees. Yet Jesus knew that the time was not yet right for a confrontation in Jerusalem, so he returned to Galilee. Little Samaritan history would be appropriate right here. Although the road through Samaria was the shortest route from Jerusalem to Galilee, excuse me, pious Jews often avoided it. They did so because there was a deep distrust and a dislike between many of the Jewish people and the Samaritans. Because the Samaritans had a historical connection to the people of Israel, their faith was a combination of commands and rituals from the law of Moses, put together with various superstitions. Most of the Jews in Jesus' time despised the Samaritan people, disliking them even more than Gentiles. Because they were, religiously speaking, half breeds who had an eclectic mongrel faith, the Jews didn't like them. The Samaritans built their own temple to Yahweh on Mount Gerizim, but the Jews burned it around 128 BC. This obviously made relations between the Jews and the Samaritans even worse. When the Babylonians conquered the southern kingdom of Judah, they took almost all the population captive, exiling them to the Babylonian Empire. All they left behind were the lowest classes of society because they didn't want these lowly regarded people in Babylonia. Uh, these ones left behind intermarried and with other non-Jewish people who slowly came into the region, and the Samaritans emerged as an ethnic and religious group. So Jesus, it said, needed to go through Samaria. He needed to go. He didn't have to go. He needed to go. The need wasn't because of travel arrangements or practical necessities, but because there were people there who needed to hear from him. In verses 5 and 6, it says, "So he came to a city of Sychar, which is called, or rather a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Joseph's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from the journey, sat thus by the well, and it was about the sixth hour." By John's reckoning, who wrote this book, this was about noon during the heat of the day. So Jesus, being tired and hot, would have wanted a drink of water from the well. Verses 7 through 9 continue. "A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, 'How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans.' This woman came for water at an unusual hour, noon, and she came alone. Typically, women of this time would come for water earlier in the day, and they would come in groups to protect themselves. Perhaps there was a sudden need for water, or perhaps more likely, she was a social outcast shunned by other women in the community, and so she came alone during a time when these other women would not be there. By tradition, Jesus, being a rabbi, would not speak with a woman in public, not even with his own wife. It was also very unusual for a Jewish person of that time to ask a favor or accept a drink of water from a Samaritan's cup. They were almost like lepers to the Jews. Jesus' request genuinely surprised the woman. The disciples were also surprised that Jesus spoke to her. That'll be it for this lesson.